Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I've got a story for you that's not just heartwarming, but truly transformative. It's about finding light in the darkest places and how sometimes the most unexpected connections can heal us in ways we never thought possible. Our story begins on the absolute coldest night of the year. I'm not talking about just a little chill. I mean the kind of bone-deep cold that makes the world feel utterly silent, like it's holding its breath. Snow was falling in thick, heavy sheets, burying everything. Roads disappeared, streetlights became blurry halos, and familiar neighborhoods turned into these quiet, ghostly landscapes. And somewhere in that profound, frozen silence, there was a whimper. Not loud, not desperate, just a tiny, fragile thread of sound trembling against the harsh wind. It was a sound that no human should have ever heard, yet somehow, someone did. Miles away, in a dimly lit apartment above an old shuttered bookstore, sat Daniel Reyes. Daniel was 42, a widower, and a former search and rescue dog handler. He'd become a recluse after a devastating accident 3 winters prior, where he lost both his human partner and his beloved canine companion. He hadn't touched a leash since. He couldn't even look a dog in the eyes without that familiar pang of grief. The world outside his window felt too loud, too sharp, too full of painful memories. But that night, something pierced through his numbness. He heard it on his police scanner, an old habit he just couldn't break. A call came in about a possible animal in distress near the abandoned rail yard on the edge of town. Dispatch quickly dismissed it. Probably just a stray, they said. Not a priority in this weather. But Daniel knew better. That whimper, it wasn't just fear. It held a flicker of something else. It was hope. Faint, yes, but unmistakable. Without thinking, Daniel pulled on his coat, his boots crunching on the ice as he stepped out into the storm. No plan, no real reason, just an ache in his chest he hadn't felt in years, pulling him forward. The rail yard loomed like a graveyard of steel. Rusted tracks, skeletal cranes, broken glass glinting eerily under the moonlight. The wind howled through hollow boxcars, and every step he took echoed in the vast emptiness. And then, movement. Beneath a collapsed tarp, half buried in the snow, curled into a ball no bigger than a loaf of bread, was a dog. Not a puppy, not old, somewhere in between. Her fur was matted, ribs visible beneath skin stretched too thin. One ear was torn. Her eyes were wide with exhaustion, but alert. She watched him. She wasn't cowering. She wasn't trying to run. She was just waiting. Daniel crouched down slowly. He didn't reach out. He didn't speak. He just sat there in the snow beside her, letting the silence stretch between them like a fragile bridge. Minutes passed. Then, with a shiver that ran from nose to tail, she lifted her head and took one unsteady step forward, then another, until her cold nose brushed the back of his gloved hand. He didn't cry. Not then. But something inside him cracked open, just enough to let a tiny sliver of light back in. He named her Ember, because in that frozen wasteland, she truly was the last spark of warmth left in his world. The vet later confirmed what Daniel suspected. She'd been abandoned, left behind when her family moved out of state, with nothing but a frayed collar and a tag that read Lucky. A cruel joke, given what she'd endured. She'd survived weeks alone in sub-zero temperatures, scavenging for scraps, dodging coyotes, even sleeping in drainage pipes. Yet somehow, she still trusted. Daniel brought her home, not because he thought he could save her, but because, against all odds, she seemed to believe he was worth saving too. The first nights were quiet. Ember slept on the floor beside his bed, always facing the door, always alert. Daniel would often wake to find her watching him, not with need, but with a quiet understanding. It was as if she knew his grief, as if she had carried her own similar burdens. Slowly, routines started to form. Morning walks through frost-laced woods, shared silence over coffee and kibble. The way she'd press her body against his leg during thunderstorms, not out of fear, but as if to remind him that he wasn't alone. These small, consistent moments started to weave a new tapestry in Daniel's life. He began to feel something akin to hope, something he thought was lost forever. And then came the day everything changed. It was spring now, the snow had melted, and birds were returning. Daniel had even started volunteering again. just walking shelter dogs, nothing too intense. But Ember, she was different. She'd stare intently at the training field behind the old fire station, her ears perked, her muscles coiled with a curious purpose. She'd nudge his hand towards the scent kits, the harnesses, the old gear he kept locked away in the garage, as if urging him to remember. One afternoon, a child went missing in the nearby state forest. Search teams scrambled, their efforts desperate. Hours turned into night, and hope dwindled with every passing moment. Daniel stood at the edge of the woods, his heart pounding, his hands shaking. He hadn't worn a handler's vest in 3 years, but Ember stood beside him, still, focused, her eyes locked on the tree line. She wasn't waiting for permission. She was waiting for him to remember who he truly was. He clipped on her harness, and together they stepped into the darkening forest. What followed wasn't magic in the storybook sense. It was instinct. It was discipline. It was a profound bond forged in snow and silence, now put to the ultimate test. Ember moved like a shadow through the trees, nose to the ground, tail held high with purpose. She didn't falter. She didn't hesitate. And when she stopped, pawing gently at a hollow beneath a fallen oak, there was the boy, shivering but alive, wrapped in his own jacket, whispering, "The dog found me." News vans arrived. Cameras flashed. Reporters called it a miracle. But Daniel knew the truth. It wasn't a miracle. It was trust. The kind of trust that S earned in the quietest moments, when no one is watching, when the world feels empty, and all you have is someone who chooses to stay. Ember never became a certified search dog. She didn't need to. She had already found what mattered most. Today, Daniel and Ember live in a small house on the edge of town. The porch light stays on at night, not for visitors, but for strays, for lost souls wandering in the cold. Because Daniel learned something profound that winter. Sometimes the ones we think we're saving are the ones who ultimately save us. And in a world that often feels like it's growing colder by the day, that kind of warmth doesn't just survive. It spreads. This story is a powerful reminder that connection and compassion can truly change lives. If this touched your heart, please hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs a little warmth today, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next inspiring tale. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.